You are watching Access LaPorte County, Channel 97. Coming up next is the April 22nd, 2024 meeting of the LaPorte County Council and Commissioners Joint Workshop. You can find more information for this meeting by visiting www.accesslaportecounty.org.
We're going to go ahead and call our workshop to order for the joint workshop for the LaPorte County Council and Board. We invited the Board of Commissioners, and this is to talk about we've got a representative from Wagner, Irwin, and Sheila here to talk about the pay grids and the structure and everything. So is everybody okay if I just have Eddie start?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Do you want me to up at the podium, or is it right here, or how do you?
It's being recorded.
You probably need to go to the podium.
Okay.
I'm just looking at the video up there, so.
All right, good evening. I'm Addie Rooker, Principal Consultant with Wagner, Irwin, and Sheely. And so today I just kind of want to walk everyone through a little bit of background of your job classification system and walk through what the factor evaluation system is and kind of how you've derived and gotten to be where you are today. So back in the early 1990s, the county hired our firm, Wagner, Irwin, and Sheely, to conduct a job classification and compensation study. The project objectives at that time were to prepare job descriptions for all county positions. That included distributing job questionnaires to employees. They filled those questionnaires out, and the supervisors or department heads had the chance to review those, sign off on them. Though that information came back to our firm, where we prepared draft job descriptions, which again were redistributed back to the departments for employees and the supervisors to review and sign off again. Those job descriptions were then used to, we classified all the job descriptions and point factored them according to the factor evaluation system. From there, the next two objectives for that project were to conduct an internal compensation study comparing the factor points to the current compensation system at that time, and then to conduct an external salary analysis to compare how the current pay schedules compared to the external market. In 2006, the county engaged our firm again to re-update that system, where we updated all the job descriptions, re-evaluated and refactored the positions, and then provided updated external salary data for the county. From 2006 going forward, the county council maintained the system with assistance from our firm as needed. I think at that we talked about I believe the county also hired HR person shortly after that period, so that was also maintained by the HR department with the county council. We assisted with reviewing any classification changes that was requested by the council, FLSA status that came up, any questions regarding that, and then providing the annual pay grid updates. In 2016, the council engaged our firm again just to conduct an external salary update. So we took the classifications that were existing at that time and just provided external salary data to the council to use to make adjustments going forward. At that time, we did find some concerns with the existing classification structure. There were some empty classification levels, instances of positions with the same job title classified differently according to the FLSA status, or some with the same title that were factored in different classification levels, and then instances of positions that were classified as unclassified that really should have been in the classification system. And then fast forward to 2022, again, the county asked our firm to conduct an updated market salary analysis. So we surveyed the external market and prepared new pay plans that reflected the external salary data. For that, all the grids were updated except for elected officials, chief deputies, the EMS, merit poll, and the jail poll. I have factor evaluation handouts. There are some here too for anyone in the audience that would like one. Do all of you have one? Do you need one?
He got a folder.
No.
Would be in the folder.
Oh, you go.
Oh, he has it in his folder. Okay. So the county utilizes the factor valuation system for classifying jobs. This is a public sector system that was developed by the Department of Labor for public sector jobs. It's not proprietary to our firm or anyone else. Most counties and cities that utilize a job classification system will utilize the FES system. The state of Indiana utilizes the system. They've modified it and changed it over time, but that's still the root of the system is the FES system. This system sorts jobs into job categories. So you're only comparing like jobs to each other. So that way we're not comparing a deputy auditor to a truck driver. You have different skill sets, different requirements, and so the job descriptions are different. They're in different categories and have different pay plans assigned. So the internal pay analysis that we did originally and looked at, we were trying to make sure there was equal pay for equal work within the classification levels. The external analysis is more to make sure that the county is competitive with the external market and can recruit and retain qualified employees and compete with the external market. So your job descriptions are the foundation of the factor valuation system. But they also serve other purposes that can be utilized and should be recognized for these other uses, including the identifying the essential functions under the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, documenting the minimum job qualifications for training, recruitment, hiring, establishing standards for training, promotion, discipline, communication within the department, and then for complying with various government regulations, including the Fair Labor Standards Act, the FLSA. All the job descriptions should be designated as either FLSA exempt, non-exempt, or excluded. Just a little definition. So excluded really applies to, this is a provision under the Fair Labor Standards Act that applies to elected officials or their any policymakers or like political appointments. So your chief deputies that serve at the pleasure of those elected officials would fall under that. But the FLSA excluded only applies to the overtime provisions. It doesn't apply to any other policies. They still have to follow the handbook. They still have to do timekeeping. All those other policies, rules would apply. And then the family medical leave, those job requirements, the lifting restrictions, all of that's in there to help determine whether an employee is able to come back and perform essential functions, as well as the Equal Pay Act. On page 2 of the handout is kind of just a snapshot of the 4 main job categories and what type of positions might fall under those. So we have PAT that are professional, administrative, technological, and there's some examples listed there. COMET, computer office machine operation technician. POL, your protective occupations, law enforcement, and then your LTC, labor, trades, and crafts. And a little more definition is on page 3 here. So your PAT positions are usually ones that will require a bachelor's degree or some sort of college training or equivalent combination of training and experience. They are directing an application or administering policies and procedures of a certain area within a department. Your COMET positions, these are positions that will probably have more on-the-job training. They may have associate's degree requirement. There may be certain certifications that you would require of those positions. Some may even have some minor supervisory responsibilities. But these are generally support positions to PATs or directly to the department heads or elected officials. Your protective occupations law enforcement, these are specialized positions that have training, maybe some specific certifications. These are your police officers, dispatchers, your corrections officers. They respond to emergencies, they're protecting people and property, or they are supervising positions that do those functions. And then the labor, trades, and crafts, these positions primarily are in your maintenance highway departments, where they are skilled and unskilled positions. They generally will learn the job on the job training. Some may require specific certifications like your CDL license, but again, these positions are more hands-on. You're going to see more physical effort, and they're going to be working out more in the inclement weather, and have that as more of a factor in their jobs. On page 4, the executive group, this is currently not being utilized in this county, but these are generally an extension of PAT. It's, the can be your department head level positions. I believe right now most of your department head level positions are unclassified, but this could be something that where they would fit if that job category was utilized. The special occupations, you do have some of these positions. You have chief deputies, and then you also have probation officers. Chief deputies are SOs because they are political appointments of their elected official. So they serve at the pleasure of the elected official and can be terminated by the elected official at any time. And they are set aside. And then the probation officers, they have to follow the Indiana Judicial Conference minimum salary schedule that's issued by the state. They would otherwise be classified as PAT positions, but because of that mandate, we have pulled them out so they can be paid according to that schedule. And then the last group are the unclassified, and this county has a fairly large number of unclassified positions. Again, most of them are department head level, and some have been placed there for various reasons over time, and I think that number has gradually grown. So the basic procedures for installing the factor evaluation system include collecting job information, writing the job descriptions, classifying positions, determining factor evaluations, and then conducting the wage and salary analysis. So the job descriptions themselves on page 5 contain these general sections that are again utilized and reflected in the factor guide charts to assign factor points. The job requirements, we have the job requirements, skills and knowledge, difficulty of work, responsibility, personal work relationships, physical effort, working conditions, and work environment. So once all the job descriptions were written, each job is factored according to the guide charts for that category. And they vary by category. And 300 points in comment is not the same as 300 points in LTC. You get there in different ways and different factors. For instance, the LTCs, a third of their points are weighted for your physical effort and work environment, where that's a much less percentage in the comments and PATs that aren't expected to do heavy lifting or generally work out in inclement weather. So once all the jobs are factored, they are assigned a total factor points number, and then within each job category, each group that is classified closely together, we assign a classification level. So for instance, in your comment group, you have 6 classification levels, and each of those levels are assigned points. So for example, comment 1 was assigned 100 to 245 points, comment 2 250 to 285. So if a job factored at 250 points, it was classified at the comment 2 level. So each position in the county for that is a comment, a PAT, or an LTC has a classification level. The poll positions have been set up as having a poll grid by department. That's been in place for many years, so that's how they have been established. But those other groups are assigned a specific classification level. And so once the levels have been established, then for the external analysis, we would collect external salary data from comparable counties, cities, including some other survey data, and would come up with a external pay line to come up with an external midpoint to utilize in setting the pay ranges for each classification level. And again, that's why you have the different pay grids, because it's reflecting that data, which is comprised of the positions in that category. And then the last but not least, one of the most important pieces of the system is maintaining it. And overall, the county has done a pretty good job of maintaining it. You still have the system, but I think what I found, in the past few years, we've kind of lost connection with the factor points to the classifications. So wanting to make sure that there is a clear understanding of how they were classified, that they weren't just randomly selected into those levels. They are rooted in factor points. And so any new jobs or jobs that from departments that would be requested for a reclassification should be evaluated using the factor guide charts to determine if there's a significant change in points that would warrant a classification change. The points, the system gives the council and the county a defensible justification for paying individuals different pay rates. Without a system, you would not be able to justify why you're paying Joe one pay rate and Sam another when they're in the same position. So this gives you that justification, and it's a defensible system for classification and compensation. So that is basically kind of the summary of what we've done for the county, what the system you have, and a brief explanation of the categories. So are there questions that you have? Yes.
Yeah, you mentioned before that. Sorry, you mentioned before that the polls, in particular, we kind of set those up by departments. So I'm thinking they're part of the PATS, or are they completely separate? I just want to make sure.
They're all polls.
They're all just separately, but we didn't discuss them in this group that we have here. So now let me take it to the PATS. We have different departments in this as well, and could we also make a decision to separate those by departments?
Well, one of the big factors is internal pay equity. So classifying like jobs. I believe, now I wasn't part of the original poll separation, but some of that was because of the different work schedules of some of those departments, and I think it got expanded over time to be more and more departments. But generally, these PAT positions work the same schedule. And we would want to make sure that they could be paid, that there's internal pay equity among like classified positions. Now, if there's a position that, had been vacant for 6 months, we can't get anyone at that pay, that's something that might be, a reason to consider pulling the position out, or, looking at setting the pay more as a special occupation type or an unclassified position.
Thank you for describing that, because one of the concerns is are we meeting market on some of the positions that have just changed drastically since this was created, and even in the past several years. So that is kind of, where I was going to take the next question to.
Yeah, and so for positions in the polls, they're generally easily direct job matched. As far as you have correction officers, you have merit police officers, you have paramedics. Those are easy to match up. It gets much more difficult in PAT and comment, where you may have a specialized position that no other county may have per se, but it's like these other jobs, so it gets encompassed as a group as part of the benchmarking, because it's factored in a similar manner as these other positions. So it'd be really difficult to do a direct job match for all of those positions.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions, Justin?
Yeah, so over the past year and a half or so, I've become aware that the distribution of classifications has kind of skewed towards the upper end. So, for example, in the comets, we have 6 comet levels. There are no comet 1s or 2s. There's very few 3s, and they're mostly 4, 5s, and 6s. In your experience, how does that compare in other counties? Do you see a trend that they're mostly shifting towards those higher levels? And to add on to that, do you believe that the separation that we have in pay between the different comet levels is in line with what other counties are doing?
Those are good questions. So to answer the first question about the kind of the shift, so this system has been around since the 1990s, and I don't believe, to my knowledge, any of those levels have been restructured over time. With the shift, I think that's common to see over time with either jobs getting, probably initially there were some very entry level positions in those lower levels that have either been incorporated into, pieces of those have been incorporated to other jobs within the county to elevate them up. And over time, either eliminating those lower level positions or replacing them with part-time positions, I think is kind of why that creep has occurred. Plus, you have a lot of employees, from my understanding, that have a lot of time with the county. They've been here. So I think some of those jobs have evolved with the individual in the positions, maybe as far as institutional knowledge, that have driven those positions for reclasses over time. So that's not uncommon. When you start to get these empty levels, it may be an indicator that may need to relook at that as that group as a whole to see if we need to restructure and rework that system or that classification to reflect what the current jobs are. And remind me what your second question was.
The second question was, is there enough spacing between the different pay and those different levels? I think, I don't have it handy now, but
It's this chart.
yeah, Comet, for example, between level 1 and level level 1 and level 2 was about $2,500, and that seems to be kind of a common theme between these, somewhat. Is that, from looking at our system, do you think that the separation between these levels is adequate?
For the comets, we would like to see at least the 3% in between. Generally, your levels, you have. So the trend lately has been fewer classification levels, and then which would allow you to have a little bit larger differential between. But again, so how these are derived was from collecting the external data, and then running an regression and setting an external pay line, which kind of drives those levels based on the pay for the positions in those classifications. I believe we reflected the external data in that last update. I don't recall how that affected the change in between, but that would be something you would want to probably keep an eye on to make sure it doesn't get too close pay compression there.
Thank you.
I'd like to feed off of what he said. When you are going around, because you do this for many, many counties, when you're going around, what are the big changes that you're seeing that for people who have even maintaining their records, what are the big changes that you see going on since the COVID period, we'll say just in the past 4 years, of things that they need to adjust, that you're finding that they need to adjust in their grids?
Well, I think a lot of counties found out what they could work with, get by as far as the number of employees, because a lot of counties kind of shut down and worked bare bones. So there has been a little bit of reevaluation of positions and letting some positions go through attrition. And then I think, remote work is one area where it's come up because during COVID, a lot of positions were allowed to work from home. But I think, there's a lot of issues with that if there's no policies around that of what's allowable, what's not. And then in general, as far as pay, we've had the increase in inflation, and overall with the market, we've seen a lot of changes with, the CDL. Any position that holds a CDL is in high demand. Attorneys are high demand, are hard to fill at the county level positions statewide. Again, you have some issues with nurses. Some counties are in better shape than others with their pay plans, being a little more competitive, and then as well as your merit officers, because we've had this, and this is statewide, where you have this other departments, cities robbing from counties and vice versa to snag their other officers from them, with higher pay. And then you have the state, Indiana State Police setting the pay at $70,000. So it puts, it kind of ties the hands of local county officials, because then Indiana State Police is now swiping officers right out of the academy. So there are a lot of issues that have kind of we've seen since that, and I think probably those are the big ones as far as compensation since the pandemic.
I'm just going to add a comment which is not related to this. One of the things that we suffer from is the way the state allows us to increase taxes every year is that it's a 3-year look back. And so we're kind of limited. So when inflation hits really high, it takes us a while to kind of get caught up to it. So we start having different timings. We have some crunches with our budgets because we see a 9% increase, but yet we're only allowed a 4% increase. So this is one of the challenges that we're also facing and seeing. So I'm just putting it out there that the inflation factor that you brought up, we don't automatically get caught up that quickly with it. It takes us a while of time. Now, this is a really nice way to prevent taxes from increasing rapidly with inflation, but it does create much more of a challenge.
Right.
So I just want to make sure I share. And I think we saw that quite a bit.
Any other questions? Anybody on Zoom that has a question or?
I'm good, thanks.
Amanda?
I'm good right now. Thank you for asking, though.
All right.
For the benefit of department heads or anybody who might watch this later who's interested in seeking a reclassification for their employee, could you, and this may take Monique's help as well, kind of give an overview of what the process looks like, what steps they would go through, what prerequisites exist in order for a successful reclassification, and when timelines that needs to be done, just so that they kind of have a full overview of the process?
Well, I don't know all the timelines that Monique requires, but in general, there should be a form, a job review form or analysis form that the departments are completing that explains what they're requesting, why, what's changed. They should have a copy of the existing job description for the committee, as well as a copy with any revisions. Should be able to, because one of the first questions the committee should ask is, what's changed in the job?
That way they can compare one to the other.
Right, so we can
A little simpler than
yes, see the specific
write the entire job
changes.
description, just show the differences in it too.
Right. We don't want just rearranging the, the duties and shuffling it up to try to cause confusion. Get at exactly what's changed. Is there, a new certification that's now required by the state? Have you restructured the jobs and now this one job is supervising other individuals? What specifically has changed in the job, and why is this request being made, and what's the impact? If you're taking duties from one and adding them to another and asking for that job to be reclassified, then we also need to look at that job that you've taken the duties away from, and now evaluate that one as well. And I think departments forget about that piece of it, because they're focused on the one that they're adding to. But when we look at jobs, we're like, well, where did these duties come from? Did they come out of thin air? No, they came from somewhere within the department, and trying to get the full picture there. And I believe those are the types of questions that the committee does ask. And I don't know if Monique, she can probably speak to the specific timelines and how you get the forms and all of that.
Good evening. Monique Thomas, HR Director. Our process usually starts, like Ms. Roker said, filling out the job analysis form as the why, and the job description, marking it up however what needs to be changed. I then get that submitted to my office, and that's usually submitted to the committee members ahead of time, so we can review, ask questions, and know, kind of get a glimpse as to what we're to evaluate. We invite the department head or supervisor or elected official to our meeting prior to our diving into the evaluation, where we can ask questions and specific questions about the why and what's changed and what's evolved, or the who, what, why, and when. Once those questions are asked to the supervisor, they then leave, and we break down our evaluation based on the guide chart that we received from Wagner, Irwin, and Shealy. And once that evaluation is completed, we go through our score sheet, and wherever on that point system where that position falls in, that's where the new classification is recommended to the council. We don't make any decisions. We just make a recommendation. That's not something that, the committee is there to do. We just there to recommend, and we don't make any final decisions. That's based upon what we present to the council members, as well as the supervisor that come before you and present their case before you guys make your final decision.
And you guys didn't take an average. If there's 5 members, you take an average of the 5.
We do, and usually it's a discussion based on the individual criteria, like the responsibilities, or the difficulties of work, or the job requirements. There may be questions raised. Well, maybe we need to start looking at people with college degrees to do this job, because it's a little bit more technical than having someone straight out of high school to do. So those are some of the questions that come up that we may ask the supervisor, or we may discuss amongst ourselves. Is this something that we need to interject into the job description as well?
In an ideal situation, the committee has no idea who the individual is.
No.
Ideally. Because they're evaluating the job.
Yeah, it's based on the job and not the individual.
Right.
The job is, like I say, usually I mark off, names or anything just based on what we have in front of us, and this is the job, not the person. Not because we like them or whatever. It's not that, but it's usually based on what the job itself entails.
I think I can speak on that too. I know I was a past committee member, and I think we took pride in knowing the fact that we didn't know who that person was, because we didn't want to be biased or to interfere with our decision. And I want to say too that we really turned a lot of requests down too. It wasn't just a rubber stamp and okay, there it is. Yeah, it sounds good. Do it. They had to prove it, and like I said, there was a lot of them that just nope.
And not every position is approved, or even we bring it before a recommendation. It's sometimes it's just like, hey, sorry, this didn't. We think it's fine where it is. So
And as far as timelines go, department heads are supposed to make these requests before June, right?
1st.
Yep, so for budgeting reasons.
All of the requests should be received to me with the job analysis, the breakdown of the job description, and everything no later than June 1st, so we can establish our meeting and move forward with evaluating.
Go ahead.
I mean, the whole purpose of it is that the council, thank you. The council has it prior to the budget.
Yes.
We're not changing things later in the fall, having to redo the salaries, ordinance and all that stuff.
June 1st
So
is the
June 1st is the deadline.
Yes, if you want anything evaluated, if you want anything looked at, it should be no later than June 1st.
So if we're looking at, we go from a level 4 to a 5, or we go from a comment to a pat based on the job evaluation committee, I would assume that if it's also approved by the committee and approved by the council, that the title changes as well as the job title as well as the description changes?
Usually it's just the classification change. So like if you have administrator of arborist or whatever. So if you had that title still stays the same, however the classification goes from a comment 6 to a pat 2.
Okay. I just remember something that Ms. Roker had mentioned about the fact of we had multiple job titles that had different job pay rates. And that's something that had to be cleaned up previously?
That was something that we found in the 2016 study. That was a concern.
We don't know that that's been cleaned up.
Yeah, I don't know. There is if a job changed enough, there should be some consistency in titles. Now, I'm not saying you can't have an office manager at comment 3 and one at comment 4, because they're not factored solely on the job title. It comes down again to those factors, to the responsibility, difficulty of work, work relationships, and so forth. But it generally, if it works if there's some consistency in the titling, so you don't have those same titles all over the board.
So am I appropriate in saying that it's not required, but maybe recommended and as best as you can within a county?
My recommendation with job titles to department heads is always the job title should reflect the job functions of the job. So, I mean, if you're a custodian, you should not have an executive director title. I mean, it should reflect what duties you're, and you'd be surprised at some of the titles that I've seen, come across over the years of, they try to inflate the job title to hope that it'll raise them. So I think if there is significant changes, I think the committee could make a recommendation. We might want to consider a different job title to be reflective and be consistent with the classifications.
Okay.
So, if I may, you mentioned just an example was office manager type role or office administrator type role. And so we could have, 5 different departments and their office administrator may not be doing the exact same thing. And it may be that the volume in one of those departments is much greater than another. So that part has to be taken into consideration. But is that because, does that make one a level 3 versus one a level 4?
Just on how busy they are.
Well, volume is not measured in the factor guide charts. It's again
Just trying to bring out little things.
yes. So I mean, when you get to volume and a department head speaks to, well, my department is doing way more than this other department, and my office manager is busy 9 hours of the 8-hour day versus this other department is only across the hall, they're reading a book or on Facebook for 2 hours a day. It doesn't come down to the volume. Again, that's a staffing issue. If they can't get the work done or they're doing, have that much work to do, it's really a staffing issue within the department.
Right.
And so, we would recommend, do they need to hire another person? Do they need to reallocate some of the duties to someone else in the department that maybe isn't as busy? Those are things. So when it comes to volume, I think that should be a red flag for the council and for the committee even, that's not what the charts are for. The charts are to evaluate the responsibility level, the job requirements of the job, what skills, knowledge, education is required, difficulty of work, responsibility, personal work relationships, who they're communicating with and why, and then the physical effort and work environment. Those are the focus of the job. Because I think, I've been doing this for my 23rd year. I've seen a lot of jobs, a lot of reclassification requests, and in general, it's a misconception by employees and department heads that if we just add more duties, if we just put more in there, then we'll automatically get reclassified. And the realization is that the job has to significantly change. If you're still requiring the same skills and knowledge, and there's no other factors have changed, just adding more of the same duties doesn't warrant a reclassification change. Again, it comes to that volume issue. So I think those are things to remember as you see reclassification requests come through, and for the committee when they're evaluating those.
Thank you.
For anyone watching this later, I just wanted to point out that the ordinance that sets up the Job Evaluation Committee is Council Ordinance number 2017-5. Just so if anyone's watching this later, they can find it easily for their reference. But a question for Ms. Rooker about what do other counties do typically for reclassifications? My understanding is that sometimes Wagner, Irwin, and Shealy does the reclassification for them, and they kind of just have you guys as a professional make that recommendation to the council directly, and there is no committee. How would you say that breaks out, among other counties?
A lot of counties will have an advisory committee, and usually how the procedures work that the request goes to the committee, and then the committee decides whether or not to send that request on to us. Because it may be something that the committee is comfortable with handling, especially your committee is trained in the factoring. Other counties that have one that may not be as well versed in the factoring and the classifications kind of tend to send all of them to us. But usually they'll have the discretion and request, okay, we've got kind of one we're not sure about, and then request us to look at it. And then we would take a look at it as a unbiased, outside opinion. And we would look at the job, factor it, we'd collect all the same information, ask Monique for those copies. Sometimes if we have questions, we would ask permission to talk to the department head or elected official. And then we would prepare an assessment. We refactor the job and then do a little summary memo with it and what we found, summarize the changes, and then give a recommendation back to the committee. Then that recommendation, the committee would then review it, and then they would recommend whatever their final action to the council.
So follow-up question, this could be routed to a lot of different places. And having just gone through the training, I can say there's definitely places where there might be gray area where they may want to seek professional input on this. Do we have a line item for the Job Evaluation Committee to be able to go to Wagner, Irwin, and Shealy or a consultant to ask questions?
Is the Wagner, Irwin, Shealy on a retainer with your office? I thought
We have a retainer.
I could have sworn
Wagner, Irwin, I think it's commissioners.
but it might be with
I pay
somebody.
it, but I don't know what it's out of, yeah.
It's primarily, I think,
Oh, it's
primarily
for
to
the
update.
retainer.
Yeah, to
$450.
update we update these each year.
Okay.
And then occasionally we'll help with some questions that
And you'll
pop
do
up.
the job evaluation things that we send you for free.
Well, if that is a piece that's going to be regular, we might have to reevaluate that
Okay.
retainer.
We tried.
I believe the retainer has been the same amount for a very, very long time, and
We're okay with that.
has been unchanged.
So don't,
So if we are asked to do more, we probably would have to reevaluate that.
I understand. Any other questions? Anybody online?
Good.
Joe, anything? Rhonda? Nobody? Nobody? Anybody in the audience?
I have a question.
You gotta.
Come into the
Please
microphone.
approach the bench. I love doing that to you guys. Yeah.
I'm Jeff Thorne. I'm judge of LaPorte Superior Court number 3, so I'm a department head. I have I guess a couple questions. One is, I want to understand how somebody can go from comat to professional. Because as I look at those titles, unless you enhanced your education or training so that you fit in as an engineer or an attorney or whatever it would be. Other than that, I'm not clear on how that jump can be made. And the second thing is, it's more of a request really. As a department head, if I have an employee that comes to me and says, I think I should be reclassified, I'd like to know where I can get the data, the information that I can evaluate and say, okay, here's where you are, here's where you want to be, and here's what it looks like it takes for you to get there. So that I'm not making a request that I don't know if they deserve it or not. You're gonna back up your employees, But I would rather tell an employee if I don't think they qualify, I want to tell them before we make a request for a reclassification. I don't want to get educated later.
HR could provide you with.
Then I'm requesting that.
The key thing is the job description for those employees, and that job description changing somewhat from where it is, but you could get that from Monique and.
No, but I want and the points. I want
Sheets.
I want to be able to look at it
Right.
and tell my employee, I think you deserve it, and I think you got a good shot, and let's go try, or I don't think it works, and they'd probably rather hear it from me, because they're going to tell me somebody else in another office does half the work they do, and they do more, and they do everything else, and they should get it, and it's hard to argue with that unless I want the rules.
I think to highlight something that was brought out is it's based off of the job description would really, really help with that. And based off the pay grids, you have, the points ranges by, let's say, COMAT 1 through COMAT 6, right? And different points ranges that those fall into. And walking through it, just as you've recommended, I think that's a great idea.
That's what I want.
And one of the things that Addie had recommended is taking the job description and the changes that we're doing a hypothetical, your employee is doing more than what is on there. Highlight those or add them in a red line so that the job evaluation committee can see it. Don't rewrite the whole job description so it's hard for them to see what's been added. In other words, these duties have been added. This is why we're asking for the reclassification.
Monique, would it be possible to get like some of this information put up on the HR page on the website, just so there was an easy place for people to go and find some of it, especially like the intro to the factor evaluation system?
I think that's
Not all I can put up there, I don't think, salaries are on the
not the salary, but as far as the scoring grid,
Yeah, the points.
you know what I mean? Is that,
I
think it's.
Yeah, it's on the state's website. The state of Indiana.
I want to know what we're doing here.
okay.
I don't want to have to go to 16 different sources. Indianapolis says this. and
She'll
somebody
get
else
you,
says
she'll
that.
get you everything you need.
Well, that's what I'm
The,
asking.
the posting on a website is something completely, well, yeah,
I-
we'll get you everything you need, and then some.
And just so that, if you want to find out my orders, whenever you want to meet with me, we can sit down, we can go through it, we can discuss it,
Okay, thank you.
whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Judge.
That was good.
Amanda?
Hi, I did have a question. So what I'm hearing, what I was understanding, the pay grids that are in place, specifically like being pulled out because they're police officers, you can compare those between everybody has a merit officer or detectives, so on and so forth. And since I have one of those positions that are specialized positions that was brought up, such as nursing, that me having my own specialized grid is not completely out of the question then. Am I understanding that?
Hang on one second.
Hi, are you speaking specifically to nurses?
She's the
Correct.
department head for health.
Health? Okay.
For the health department, and I have nurses. I'm one of those that have had vacancies for 5 years that we haven't been able to fill specifically because of pay.
Yeah, I think, the positions we would look at trying to pull out are positions that would be, have been vacant for a long time, difficulty to recruit and retain, and that if the pay scale isn't covering what it costs to recruit those positions, I think that would be something that the council could consider. I think we've discussed this previously, but there's different steps, and I think it would have to be on a case-by-case basis per position, whether one would be pulled out or not. And again, I think we talked earlier about the council reevaluating all of the positions to see if that scale could accommodate that before pulling those positions out.
A question to that end, and please don't take this as being indicative of my support or opposition to anything related to the health department, but what would be the downside of taking types of things like nurses out and separating them or doing this elsewhere. And
So the downside again, because positions have been classified based on factor points, you have other positions that are factored there in the category with nurses. The PAT category is a little unique because you have a lot of different various jobs. They're from different departments. You have IT, you have nurses, lots of different functions going on. So the downside would be that it may be difficult to maintain that internal pay equity because you had classified them similar with other positions, and now you're pulling these other ones out and treating them differently.
I think to kind of sum your description there up a little bit, it's kind of like when it comes to urgent. When everything's urgent, nothing's urgent. And when everything's specialized, then nothing's specialized. So how do we create a system? I think is probably the best way to do that. And we've just got to do it systematically in order to do so.
Right. And I mean, the nurses, I would say probably, I can't remember exactly what year, but we went through this staffing shortage once before, maybe around 2010, 2012, I can't remember exactly. But a lot of counties, they did have to pull some of their nurses out and pay them competitively in the market. But then as the market kind of caught up, a lot of those moved them back in the system. It was more of a temporary move to get fill some of those positions. It's not, it is possible, but you just want to I would do it with caution before you would pull any positions out.
And Amanda, what is the classification that you're talking about creating?
The classification for my grid,
Yeah.
or for what level?
You want
of
the
nurses
nurses
are now?
group too, the one that we talked about.
So currently the nurses are a PAT 3. And we had spoken about creating our own health department grid. And I don't know about the different levels, but health department, nurse supervisor, medical assistant.
And if I may, Amanda, when we were talking about it, there's been some movement on, there's very few, if any, licensed practical nurse, and you're getting more to ASNs and BSNs, which those in itself may be means to move not so much into a separate grid, but move further up the grid levels, because now you're getting into bachelors of science nursing and associates of science nursing, and not having the licensed practical nurse, which is more of a certificate.
So right now we don't even accept LPNs. We just have the ASNs and BSNs right now, and they're classified at the same level currently.
Which
Yeah.
might be a gap that you could leverage.
Correct. I'm sorry, I had a dog barking. What was the question?
No, I think we covered it. Between where we walked through all of that, it sounds like that through the job evaluation committee and job description adjustments, utilizing ASN versus BSN may give you room to move from PAT 3 to PAT 4 or PAT 5. Not speculation, assuming how the points roll out with the responsibilities and the minimum skill requirements that comes in. And I'm getting the head nod from Addie, which is I'm following the rules.
Yes.
It's always good. Is that good, Amanda?
I believe so. I think so.
All right. Anything else? Sure.
Steve Hollifield. When Judge Thorne asked his question about putting stuff on the website, it seemed Ms. Thomas said there's certain things we can't. Why?
Job performance, you've got to be careful.
Okay, so if there's additions to personal information then.
It's kind of floating into a gray area that I think is where she's initially, and if I were in her shoes, this is the way I'd react is, I'll have to check. Is kind of a response, is kind of where you're at. The immediate answer is, I can't commit. I'd have to check because you start talking about personnel records.
Okay, that's
besides
would be
public pay.
Okay.
Well, my impression was the scoring charts themselves are.
As a Teamster steward, for you guys have got a lot more descriptions than most factories I've ever seen. So I just wonder what the differences would be.
Well, and we don't use all of them. So I mean, if you look at what is available, there's other ones available that we're not even using.
This is for statewide.
Right.
Okay.
My impression was this didn't have as much to do with it being like personnel information that was contained in the scoring rubric. It was more the fear is that departments would game the scoring system, right? Is that the reason that it isn't typically shared?
Right. Usually those factor guide charts are kept within the HR department if you have HR, or maintained by the council to prevent any writing to the charts. Now, if department head wants to see them, come to HR, look at them, but we generally don't recommend that they just be blasted everywhere, because you will get department heads that would take advantage of those and try to write to the charts.
Excluding you, Judge. That
You would never.
I can't hear very well.
But department heads, they get desperate. They want a job. They care about their position, their individual in those jobs, and they want to do everything possible. So I think educating them on the points, how they work, that there are charts. If you want to come see them, she can share how they were factored and explain. But I think I would caution the council on releasing them, and especially posting them. But I think they are available if someone wants to see them. That's the process that I would recommend.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Going once? Going twice? Anything you want to add?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, we're here to assist the county in any way you need us. I mean, we if you would want to make some changes to your maintenance program, we can assist with that. And we work with a lot of counties, kind of a on demand, as needed, on demand, whenever, for those type of questions. And so you have a HR department where some counties don't, so you have that to your advantage. But we're always here to assist if there are some questions or sticky wickets that come up that you're like, we don't know.
Let me ask you a sticky wicket. Real quick. Our highway driver, they're LTC3s, correct? I think everybody's in agreement there. So that includes the truck drivers, the machine operators, everything. And they're required to have a CDL, but I guess not all laborers have to have a CDL. So is there a way to increase that out of a 3 because of the CDL? Or is that's something that we've struggled with for the last 2 years?
Well, I think you would have, I think I looked at this when, I think someone called me about this question. Yeah.
Several.
You have mechanics and I think foremen, so you would have to make sure that internal rank structure isn't jeopardized by moving one position up.
Right.
Because those mechanics are factored at a higher difficulty of work level than your equipment operators, truck drivers, whatever you're calling them.
Talk about the mechanics in a second.
Yeah. So
Second part of the sticky wicket.
but there are things we talked about in the training session of if establishing some internal tier pay.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you are having some issue, you could have some tier pay that would be tied to specific criteria for the equipment operators within that classification level. So you would have that kind of incentive and some room to move as long as they met that criteria.
So I think what the issue too is some of our maintenance people are classified as LTC.
So is what we were kind of led to believe is that if we were to increase the highway workers with the CDL, we would have to increase the maintenance people too.
Because as right now, you have all of them. You've established that they are like classified jobs. So I would recommend
They're LTCs, but
LTC if they're whoever is an LTC 3, if that's where your equipment operators are, and you want to give them a raise. Anyone in that 3, we would recommend that you give the same raise. Now, if you created some sort of tier pay, and tying it directly to that truck driver like position. So you'd have a base pay for all LTC 3s. But then let's say you establish some tier pay for the truck drivers based on, they've been here at least 5 years, or that they have, a class A instead of a class B CDL or something along those lines that would elevate that pay higher. Then you could do something like that.
It just seems as though machine operators, a guy out there running a $750,000 excavator, and the responsibility, or a $200,000 dump truck plowing snow, driving around through the winter and doing those things, to be in the same classification as I'm not taking anything away from maintenance, but they're in a kind of, a lot of times, more of a controlled substance. They do majority of the work inside. They do a lot of outside cleaning snow and do different things like that. But that's where we've struggled with the highway guys.
Well, haven't we struggled with
That's the other part.
with the sheriff's mechanics? There's 4 of them, and they work on ambulances, all the emergency vehicles, and nothing against the county highway, but there's a lot more technology that goes into an ambulance and a police car than a dump truck.
But they're in LTC 5, and that's when we called. It was like, is there a way to create a 6?
Yeah.
Can you
we
expand the grid?
We could reevaluate all the LTCs to see if there's any way to restructure if we're missing something. But you would want to I would recommend you look at the whole group of LTCs, make sure the job descriptions are accurate. And then to see, again, there might be an empty class or two, I don't know, in that lower level. So it might be time for a restructure in there. And then we could look at some of those issues and see what the best way is to rectify. But trying to piecemeal that by cherry picking positions, I don't think is the best route to do that.
I mean, kind of to her point, as I'm looking through the LTCs from the pay grid we approved in the first part of the year, total, it looks like we've got 79 LTCs from 1 to 5. Working our way up from 1 through 5, we're at 7, 11, 47, 2, and 10. And now, if you look at how that's laid out, it should be a bell curve. It should somewhere in the middle.
See, we have the majority of our highway driver. That's the bulk of the employee.
And I'm thinking more philosophically, right? When you set up a system like this.
Yeah, because that structure those breaks probably follow more of the rank structure of the highway department, or should. We don't want to jeopardize the internal rank structure of those positions by grouping the wrong ones together.
Yeah.
So,
but it almost seems like that the LTC 3 could be broken out a little bit without looking at the job descriptions and the number of people that we need in those roles.
well, your county is a little different because you have a lot of counties will have a breakout of truck driver and then equipment operator, or maybe they'll call them light equipment operator and heavy. I mean, generally there's 2 groups, so it would be broke out a little bit more, but you've got them all together, which is fine. That's why I think you have that really large number in that 3 group.
You don't have that level of discretion between them.
Right.
So a reevaluation of all LTCs might be in order, if we want to look at that. And then maybe the same consideration for the PATs, so that we're not trying to just pull one group out when we talked about the nurses.
Right.
Yep.
So we're looking at, so this recommendation is you look at the entirety rather than just try and.
Yeah, and then if there's an issue, like, look, no, we've relooked at these nurses, their payout in the market is way higher than any other, and then so the recommendation might be to pull them out. And there may be, we're looking at the LTCs, we find something different, we really should break these, or we need another level, and then we create that if the points allow for in the system and restructure.
Right.
Because you've had these same levels for a long time, so jobs have changed, they've shifted, they've creeped up a little bit, so it may not be a bad time to make some, take a relook.
Oh, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Nope.
I'm good.
All right.
That's it.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.